Welcome to Eagles Haven Ministry in the upper room, as well as Eagles Haven 1 on YouTube and Eliyahu channel on YouTube. We welcome you here this midweek service. We're doing a recording to special teaching that very necessary. We need to get out and share with people for they can have a revelation understanding of more deeper truth of how at the time of our Mashiach things were in operation, that there weren't just Pharisees and Sadducees, but there were a multitude of sects. And what did the Messiah call himself? And what did Shaul, after he met our Mashiach, call himself as well? So we welcome you, all the Mishporka of the Goyim, sojourning, coming in and coming home to the house of Yisrael. All the Goy, all the ethnic groups, all the ones that are out there and coming back in and finding themselves to be rooted and crowded into the stump of the room. All the Gurim, the ones that are of the house of Ephraim that are scattered or don't even know that they're of the house of Yisrael, and coming in and waking up when they hear the name of Yahuwah or the Shem of Yahushua HaMashiach, and they get quickened inside of the Ruah to know that there's something else here that they need to research and hunger and thirst for. For how many of you know this is the time that the veil, the time of the fulfillment of the Goyim has come to pass, of the Goy. It's been fulfilled. We're at that date now where the revelation has come forth and the veil for us to walk through and everyone to walk through, that Yahushua is Mashiach in this time for everyone to come to that understanding. So we welcome you here today, and I just love you and praise Yahuwah that you could join us. If you're watching by DVD or watching by stream or listening by CD, we welcome you all into this powerful teaching that we're going to share. Once you hear this message, just like most of the messages that come out of our ministries, is that you'll never be the same when you read the Tanakh, the Brit HaKadasha, and the Torah as well. So go with me now to the book of Matthew. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 16, verse 1. And we're going to have some fun in this particular teaching, explaining to you the understanding. We've been misled. Like we've been led. Not in the Hebrew mindset. If we're among the Hebrews, we would know this knowledge I'm about to share with you. We've been misled with the type of the Catholic daughter, harlot, offshoot, Reformation Protestants that have left this information out, not because it's done purposely, but it's because of lack of knowledge. And my people perish for lack of knowledge. And this will help you in your understanding what we're about to learn. Was there just Pharisees and Sadducees? We're going to find out how many sects. We don't really know the broadness of how many sects of beliefs were at the time of our Mashiach. Is the word sect a bad word? No, it's not really a bad word. It's just a school of thought or an understanding of teaching that people obediently follow of the word. And we as believers of Yahushua, we are following the word of the understanding or the belief system, which the people would call a sect, but even Christianity is a form of a sect when you look it up in Webster Dictionary. So go with me now to Matthew, or Matthew if you're in the English Bible, in chapter 16. And we're going to start at verse 1. And we're going to start with the sect of the Sadducees. We're going to see two of them here, but then we're going to split it, and we're going to see both of them, and then we're going to see different ones that pop up. Verse 1. Then the Pharisees and the Sadducees came and testing him, asked that he would show them a sign from Shammai. Look at verse 6. Then Yahushua said to them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, because he just mentions two here, people think there's only two sects. But we're going to find out there's a more broader offshoots and who these sects were and where they come from. Let's also read verse 11. It says in verse 11, in Matthew 16, how is it to you, do not understand that I do not speak to you concerning bread, but be aware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Verse 12. Then they understood that he did not tell them to be aware of the leaven of the bread, but of the doctrine, the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. So a sect has a particular doctrinal teaching that they follow, and traditionally some is good and some is added on by either the Babylon Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, and some is written by Moshe, which is pure and clean. And some traditions are all right. There's nothing wrong with it, even though it's not in the Word. But some traditions become a bondage when it's overpowering people's ability of spiritual strength. So let's look and find out who they were. The Sadducee sect were from the house of the Zadokites. And we're going to find that the Zadokites are ancestors of the Zadok. The Sadducees are now considered what you would call a Karaite. The Karaites are considered Sadducees today. They claim to be a part of that particular sect system. Might be a little more cleaner than that particular time of our Mashiach, but it's still a Karaite roots. And you can go with me now to the book of Nehemiah chapter 13, and we're going to look a little bit about the root of that, of the Zadokites, of the Sadducees. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 13. And I appointed as treasurers over the storehouse Shelemiyahu, the priest of Zadok, the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedaniah, and next to them was Hanan, the son of Zakur, the son of Mattaniah, for they were considered established. Matter of fact, the word where it says faithful in King James is the word amin. So it means established. And their task was to distribute to their brother. So that particular house of the Zadok, or the Zadokites, and their Levites, and they had a particular duty, and that's the first root scripture of historical logging of where they came out of historically. So number one, write it down in your notes. That was the Sadducees. Okay? You can also find them in Israel chapter 7 verse 2. And then if you're reading the Talmud, 2 chapter 1 verse 1. But we're going to focus on Nehemiah 13:13 for better understanding. Now the word Sadducees in the new covenant, or the fifth covenant of a Mashiach, as the ultimate Pesach lamb, was 14 times mentioned in the scriptures. Okay? Now we're going to go to the Pharisees, and the Pharisee sect was 13 times in the new covenant, and we're going to go to Maashi chapter 26 verse 5. We're going to go to Maashi 26 verse 5, and we're going to look a little bit about the sect of the Pharisees and who they are a little bit. There's a little hints here and there. You'll never get the full understanding unless you're reading certain information on the Hebrew roots, or the Hebrew understanding, or even the Orthodox understanding of their explanations. You can find it on Wikipedia. You can go on Google it, and you can have more information that I'm sharing with you. I'm not trying to get in detail because it would take several hours for each sect to understand. I just want to let you know there's more than just two, and if they're in operation today, and what was our Mashiach, and what particular sect he was comfortable with around and fellowshipping with in this household. So let's Maashi chapter 26 verse 5. They knew me, this is Shaul talking, from the first, if they were willing to testify that according to the strictest sect of our belief or teaching, I lived a Pharisee. So he said the strictest sect was the Pharisees, and you could go also to Acts 23:8, and 2 or 3 witnesses here, 23:6 and 8. So we're going to look at 6. But when Shaul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee of the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. Verse 8, it is written, For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection and no angels or ruha or spirit in a human being, but the Pharisees confess both. So it gives you a hint. But I'm telling you, you can go online and get more information. We're just showing you the basics of that revelation understanding. Basically, the Pharisees is the Talmud, the Mishnah, the second oral Torah, or oral right ruling, they call the law. And law is a Latin word. It's not fair to call it law. It should be second oral Talmud instructions of the Sanhedrin. So, these are the Sanhedrin. These are the ones that Ananias and Caiaphas were. They were living large. They were in charge, and they're the ones that opened the courthouse illegally late at night, and arrested our Mashiach, brought him in, held a hearing without all the full council there, and broke all kinds of rules according to Leviticus and Moshe written. But the Pharisees believed that the Talmud oral law is above the written, so they broke all kinds of laws that night. They broke all kinds of laws that night when they did this to our Mashiach. Okay? So that's the Pharisees. And you'll find that you can go on, there's 13 times it's mentioned, and you could go ahead and look at it. And now let's go to the third one, scribe. They're not in, I didn't put them in. I put them in this order. It doesn't mean that it's like a standard order. This is just the order that I have. Okay, and I'm saving the last for the best. And for this, my mic keeps messing up. Excuse me. Okay, so let's look at the third one is scribes. Scribe and scribes. Okay, scribe is totally 62 times scribes in the New Covenant, and scribe is 4 times in the covenant. So four times in the covenant. Okay, so now we're going to look at Lucas chapter 20 verse 19, and we're going to look at that a little bit, and we're going to get a little understanding of it. Luke chapter 20 verse 19. It is written, and the chief priests and the scribes that very hour sought to lay hands on him, but they feared the people, for they knew he had spoken this parable against them. Okay, so this is a hint of the scriptures. There's numerous of scriptures for the word scribe and scribes, and basically it's a recorder, a town clerk, and a secretary. Okay? Now, they are Levitical priests, which we're going to find in 1 Chronicles 2:55. 1 Chronicles 2:55. And we're going to see the roots of the scribe. And the families of the scribes who dwelt at Yabiz were the Terathites. I thought it was Karaites, but it could be, I don't know. I didn't do a full research, but it's Terathites and the Shemithites and the Secathites. These were the Kenites who came from Hamath, the father of the house of Rechab. Okay? Now, go with me to 2 Chronicles 34. And look at verse 13. We can look at 12 and 13. Okay? And it's written in chapter 34 of 2 Chronicles. He says, and the men did the work with I don't want to use the word faithfully, but it's they did the work consistently, trustworthy. Their overseers were Yahath and Obadiah, and the Levites, and the sons of Mary, and the Zechariah, and Meshulam, and the sons of the Kohathites. Again, the Kohathites are mentioned, to supervise, and others of the Levites, all of them who were skillful with the instruments of music. So these were the worshipers, instruments of music. Verse 13, were over the burden of bearers, over the overseers of all who did work in any kind of service. And some of the Levites were scribes, officers, and gatekeepers. So this is some of the verses to give you a little understanding. Like I said, it's 50 times in the first covenant of scriptures. Of course, in Yirmiyahu chapter 8, it says, in vain is the pen of the scribes. Because we know that the scribes were manipulated and eventually kept the Nishem of Yahushua's name being spoken. So this is the third one. Scribe or scribes, a recorder. In Hebrew it's 5908. It is Safar. In Greek it's Grammatias. Okay? And with an S, or not an S for scribe in the Greek, it's the same Greek word 1122. In Hebrew, it's the same thing, 5608, Safar. Now, there's different understanding what a Safar, this Safar is. It's a recorder, a writer that recounts information historically and also legal information, like a recorder clerk. Okay, we have today. And also when you go to the city hall and they're recording things, they're doing all the recording. But also they're depicted as a serpent-like or reptilian kind of pictures in some of the ancient artwork. So it's kind of strange that that would happen. But Sofarim, they call it in Hebrew. Now let's go to the fourth one. And this is doctors. Now doctors are specialists, teachers, and instructors. In the Greek, it's 1320. It is did askalos, did askalos, meaning teacher, doctor, instructor. Today you would call them a doctor, and they got several degrees of doctrine, degrees, and they're a professor. And I don't like to use those words too much of doctor, because we're getting information from the Masons of these degrees and the masters and all that from the grandmasters. So this is the different vocabulary that they have projected and given to us with the King Imus version, and also with this education system we have today. In the Hebrew mindset, they don't really use those kind of words. They have a Hebrew proper words for it. But they were doctors. And the doctors and the lawyers and the scribes, they have different ways of the sects, of beliefs, of documenting things. It's not just for, like we've seen in the scriptures, that we have noticed little hints here and there. But you got to realize, there's them that do the kosher food, that are chemists of recipes of food. They're the ones in Israel today that take apart the particular chemistry of certain foods to try to come into Jerusalem, and they go through it to make sure it's totally kosher. They're chemists. They have a master's and doctor's degree in chemistry, and they know recipes, so they're cooks, and they know the proper to look at the vocabulary of the strange words, like when we open up our food and we see everything in back, to know if it's high in sodium, low, if it has pork, or if it has shrimp, or if it has products from hair of birds that are unclean, or animalistic parts that are unclean, or fish that is unclean, and they know to keep it out from the restaurants in Jerusalem. And they have to have a certificate of understanding as a lawyer too, or they have another lawyer working with them to certify or ban this product, or also they have their doctors in medicine and medical. Back in the days of Yahushua, they were into the medical field. And what I mean by medical, these Levitical priests, Kohan, were specialists to know if somebody claims to be disabled, they had to go with blushing conviction, prove their disability, And then by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, there'll be a doctor to medically check them. There'll be a lawyer, and there'll be a scribe. Those 3 people will be present in their different belief teaching systems. And then they will certify them disabled and give them a coat. If it was somebody that had a leopard, they would get a leopard's coat. If they're blind, they get a blind coat or a garment, and they have the right to stand in the corner and to beg and get money. And today they have a certificate signed by these particular high priest or particular Kohan with legal stamps and seals and certifications, and they're able to sit and stand in tourist areas in Jerusalem, and they have a plaque, and then you see the plaque that they're certified beggars, and they have a certification of a legal document that they're physically, medically disabled and ability to beg freely. And by the Torah, we're supposed to give to those people because they don't have no type of system like we have in the United States of Social Security, disability, and all those things. So there, they developed this continued good, clean tradition of the Levitical understanding of the Torah and the Tanakh of how to take care of the poor that you always have, that the Messiah said. So these sects were very broad. These Kohan, these Levitical priests, it was not just dealing with the temple, the hekel, or the gatekeepers or the musicians. There's a more broader in the Kohan and Levitical priesthood to take care of every single thing that needs to be certified, documented, and by lawyers, by medical doctors, or even by chemists that know the recipes, the proper mixture of food. Because today we got so many spices, we got so many ingredients. I remember in Israel they tried to bring in they were talking about the Coca-Cola products and Pepsi. It was banned, and it had to go through certain rabbis that were chemists, and they were doctors and lawyers, and they particularly went through the recipe, and they didn't want to give up the recipe, but they said, if you don't give up the recipe, you cannot have these products sold in Jerusalem. So they had to learn to see the recipes and correct unclean particles of elements they're putting in the Pepsis or Coca-Colas or other soft drinks coming in to Jerusalem. And so, which is very nice that they're like they're armor bearers. They're guarding the food and drink for us. Here in the United States, there's none of that, because there's no blushing conscience of conviction to put garbage, to put blood cells from animals, or shaved hair from ducks and geese and all these animals, or pork, and they put it in bread to make it stick together, and then people eat it and don't even know they're eating unclean, or they have blood in it mixed, or other recipes that have unclean animals, birds, or fish. So this is a safeguard. So these different sects of the Pharisees and Sadducees and the doctors and the lawyers, and we're seeing these were all set up for a safeguard for our safety. Okay? So it wasn't just Pharisees and Sadducees. We're now going to look at the doctors. Let's go to, it's 59 times in the Renewed Covenant. It's 1320. It's instructor or teacher in the Greek as well as in the Hebrew. And we're going to look at, let's see, what are we going to start with? Let's see here. Let's go to, how about Ma'ashi, or Acts chapter 5 verse 34. And it's very important that you understand there's more than 2 sects, because you're going to realize what our Mashiach called themselves, and what even Shaul, we heard a little bit earlier, he was a Pharisee. We're going to see it more here. But he switches his sect. He switches when he runs into Mashiach. Okay? So we're going to hear this in verse 34. Then one in the council stood up, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a teacher of the Torah in the right ruling instruction, held in respect by all the people. That word teacher is actually instructor or doctor in the Greek. Okay? And commanded them to put the emissaries, the ambassadors, outside for a little while. And he said to them, men of Israel, take heed to yourself what you intend to do regarding these men. So he stood up among lawyers, Pharisees, Sadducees, being a professor, a doctor, a teacher of the right ruling. Okay? So, look at also 22. Chapter 22. Verse 3. I am indeed. Let's start at verse 1. Brethren and fathers, hear my defense before you now. And when they heard that he had spoke to them in the Hebrew language, they kept all the more silent. Then he said, he's speaking in Hebrew now, I am indeed a Yehudi, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in the city of the feet, at the feet of Gamaliel, taught according to the strictness of our fathers in Torah, and was zealous toward Allah as you all are today. I persecuted the way to the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women, in other words, them that were following the Mashiach. So he was taught under the doctor, the teaching of Gamaliel, the strictest teaching in school of university, of the Hebrew understanding of the Pharisaical. They taught the main Pharisaical understanding of Talmud, Mishnah, second oral law of Sanhedrin, but they also probably had taught other varieties like doctors of medicine, lawyers, people that are teaching chemists of recipes for food, proper kosher eating, what's coming and going in the marketplace, making sure everything's clean. So it was probably a school teaching all around understanding to get these Levites, these Kohan, these people in the Levitical priesthood could be, we don't call it ordained, or they did anoint each other with oil, and they taught them to graduate and be under the ordination of these particular teachers, but they would be distributed throughout Jerusalem and out the land to synagogues and places to help the people understand a better, clean or moral understanding in detail of the strictness of particular the sect of Pharisees. So it's under Gamaliel. Now in Luke chapter 2:46 and Lucas chapter 5:17, read on your own later on. This is the same word, instructor and teacher, and it shows you a little bit more in Lucas 2:46 and 5:17. Okay? So that's number 4. Doctors, teachers, instructors. Higher level. You notice when the Sadducees and Pharisees and the Sanhedrin met, they all spoke, but Gamaliel spoke up, they got silent, they listened to him, and they took his advice. Why? There was probably students sitting there in the midst of them. Okay? He's like the grandpa elder instructor, right? I heard that they speak 4 or 5 languages. The average one that came out of this university, that Shaul came out of, this particular school, of Mishnah or Shiva. So now let's look at verse 5. Lawyer. Lawyer is only 3 times in the New Covenant, and lawyers is 5 times. But in Greek it's 35:44, and it's nomikos, and they teach the new Mosaic Torah of ceremonial experts of the Torah. So they're the ones that taught more of the details of the feast, the proper order of ceremonial of the feast, of the Shabbat. They teach the instructions. They're experts, probably also of the calendar. I don't know. There's other sects that were more better in the calendar, or they had a different way of learning the calendar. But this is particular who these lawyers were, nomikos. And let's look at Luke 14:3. 14:3, and it says here, and Yahushua answering spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, showing. Now the reason I picked this verse, because there's 8 verses. I picked this verse so you can see the distinct difference, that there was a separation, because he says lawyers and Pharisees, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Shabbat? Now remember, the lawyers were dealing with the Torah on ceremonial of the feast. So here they're trying to trap our Mashiach with a question, but using the oral Babylon Talmud Torah understanding, and trap our Messiah. And they hit him with this question, showing the root of their teaching was concerning ceremonial experts of Torah. Okay? But it's the new Mosaic Torah, or Jerusalem Talmud. Okay? So, if you want to look at another scripture in Titus 3:13, go look at it yourself. Titus 3:13 shows that one of the lawyers was a friend of Shaul, and he was a convert. So they're not always, they were some of them that came out and received the Mashiach, and they were with the disciples years later as well. That's Titus 3:13, showing that a lawyer was converted. Let's go to the essence, or the essence. The essence were self-denial, temperate, true calendar seekers. They were into agriculture and understanding the calendar through agriculture. They believed in divine communion. They believed in vernal equinox. They did not practice, and they exercised to teach not to have any slavery whatsoever, especially of the people of your own belief of Israel. They lived by the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, by Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were nearby found. So this is the essence, and that was a known sect, and you can go to Josephus and the information of historical writings and see it's not in our scriptures. There's only hints of who they are, but they were their own particular sect, and they even say that they had a few days different calendar than the normal traditional calendar that they were practicing then. Okay? So it's ESSENES of this particular sect. Now, let's go to, let's see. Now, that was number 6. So we did 1, Sadducees, 2, Pharisees, 3, scribes, 4, doctors, 5, lawyers, and 6, the essence. Okay? Now we're going to look at the 7th sect. Now remember, I'm only covering 7, but I heard that that time there was a multitude more of sects, of schools of teaching, because of the broad understanding of even today in Israel. I've sat with rabbis that were into the recipes and the understanding of the chemistry of being kosher. I sat with some that were more into the law, politically and economically, and all the legal system. Okay? Then I met some that were teaching concerning the feast, and they get into arguing about how to do this and that with the feast. They all have a different system. So there's different sects of beliefs, and one time I thought they were, because most Jews, when we Israelites, Yehudi, get on a table, and a round table, and we start to fellowship, and we start to open the Word and discuss things, it sounds like they're arguing. And one brother started laughing. He says, "Don't be tripping on them." He said, "There's 70 rabbis, and they all agree that they all disagree." Okay, but they're all brothered. They all believe in Torah. They believe in the feast. They believe in the Shabbat. When they walk out the door, there's a set of beliefs that they believe in and agree out of love one to another. Okay, so now we're going to look at the 7th sect, even though there's more. And if you want to block me and give me some hints with scriptures that you have found, or information and writings, I know I could have pulled up the Talmud and I could have pulled up more stuff, but I don't want to bore you with that and go into too much detail. I just want to give you the basics understanding, and because I want to focus on a particular sect that our Mashiach called themselves, and Shaul. Remember, Shaul was a Pharisee of the strictest sect of this particular doctor and teacher that is mentioned in scriptures. He claimed them, and he also even stepped in the crowd among the Pharisees and Sadducees and lawyers, and he stepped in the crowd and protected them to be released without a death penalty of some kind. Okay? So it's wonderful that he stepped in and recognized even Shaul in a quiet way. Okay? And we're talking about Gamaliel, okay, a doctor of the law, of the Torah. Now we're going to look at the seventh sect, and it's the sect in Greek of the Nazarenes. In Hebrew, it's the sect of Nazir. Samson, that's the first time the sect of the Nazir was in Scripture, was Samson. And they give you some understanding about that they don't drink wine, eat raisins, they let their hair grow, they abstain from certain foods and drinks, and they don't shave or cut their hair on the Nazir oath. They take an oath. They take an oath for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, or total separation with their family to a nearby location. They would do that. The Nazirs, now remember, they were in the lower Galilee, near the coast. They almost look like the similarity of the essence. Okay? They were in between the year 900 and 600 BC is where some archaeological or archaeological research information of historical value that was found of locations. There were actually 7, they say, or maybe 9 of these particular clans of families that were Nazirs, or we call today Nazarenes. Okay? They didn't have to be of a particular Levite. They could. They could be of any tribes. They could bring their wife, and they could bring their children, and they could join this particular sect, and which are the watchmen of Torah. They watch the Torah. They watch the Torah as watchmen and keepers of the Torah. Okay? And the oldest history, 900, 600 BC. Finally, a town by 200 BC averaged a population of 300 to 500 or so people. Okay? Now, today in Jerusalem they have a city called Nazareth. That city was actually declared in 400 AD, started the construction, but it was declared in the mid-300s by Constantine, the Roman emperor's mother, that took witchcraft and bones and threw it in the ground and pointed to that area and say, that's Nazareth. But the word Nazareth and Nazarene are two different words. There's one word for somebody that lives there, a part of the clan, and somebody that's living as a watchman of Torah. And there's another word for them that don't have to live in that particular location, but they were Nazirs or Nazarene. They had the oath or the covenant. Like Yochanan, John, they called him the Baptist, but the immerser. John was wearing and living an example of a Nazir. Okay, there's no verbal expression that he was, but he was with camel's hair. He was out there in the wilderness. He was proclaiming, being a proclaimer of Yahushua to come, and he was recognized by the Mashiach, and he was a relative, and also he was a high priest. His mother was of the family of high priests, and his father's high priest, and we all know that through scriptures in Luke, when he got his lot to go in and got his name and saw the messenger. Okay? Now, so that's a little understanding of who they are. Now let's look at let's start off in, let's see here. Where should we go first? Let's go to Acts 20. Let's see. How about 24 verse 5. 24 verse 5. Let's start off there in Mahashi. Acts 24 verse 5. And it says here, for we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Yehudim throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Okay? So he didn't say he was from the city. This particular Greek word is not the one that says he's from the city, but he's part of the sect of the followers of the Nazirs, or in Greek, the Nazarenes. So they're presenting his case that who he is. But now he's about, remember, he said he was a Pharisee, of the strictest Pharisee. All of a sudden, he switches once he meets the Mashiach. And in the same chapter, let's see, verse 14 now. But this I confess to you, that according to the way. Now, if you got a King James, they put a capital W. There's a little codex there. And to let you know, they're the followers of Yahushua, which they call a sect. So I worship Aloha of my forefathers, believing all things which are written in Torah and in the Hanavi. So he didn't say, at first he was a part of the Mishnah, the Pharisee, Babylon Talmud. Now he's claiming, they called him out and said, you're of the sect of the Nazarene. You're a ringleader of them. And he said, this sect I believe, and also of, I am also, he says, the worshiper according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship Elohim of my forefathers, believing all things which are written, in Torah. He didn't say oral. He said under the law, works of the law, justified by the law. He said written in Torah and in the Hanavi, the prophets. Because the Hanavi, the prophets, they spoke and declared Nebuah, prophesied of Mashiach to come. Nebuah. Okay? So he claimed, they told him he was a sect of the Nazarenes. He claimed to be of the sect of the Nazarenes. And then he now follows the written Torah of Moshe and the Hanavi. Okay? Now let's go to chapter 28. Excuse me. Chapter 28. Verse 22. And he said, but we desire to hear from you, excuse me, what you think. For concerning this sect, we know that it is spoken against everywhere. So according to this word sect keeps coming up, of the sect of the Nazarenes, and he's presenting his case and preaching the good tidings, the good news, the bazaar of the Mashiach as a believer of this sect. And we're going to see why he now switched. With all his education, he said he called dumb. In other words, just like when we come to the knowledge of Yahushua Mashiach, and we come to the knowledge of the true name, and the Hebraic roots, and the understanding of Mashiach, and we went for a while as believers of the Messianic a little bit, and then we kind of continue to grow and mature into a true understanding as a follower of Yahuwah, that we tore up all our certificates, all our degrees, all the master degrees of knowledge, of education, of this educational system that they preconceivedly put us in these little cookie dough boxes to create us to be like these denominations that I call now Catholic harlot daughters parishes. Catholic parishes are like what you call today denominations. Okay? So he came out and he called everything he ever learned dumb. He said now he's believing everything different since he came to the knowledge of Mashiach. And look at verse 28, verse 22 again. But we desire to hear from you what you think, for concerning this sect, we know that it is spoken against everywhere. Okay? Verse 23. So when they had appointed him a day, many came to hear him at his lodging, to whom he explained and solemnly testified of the sovereign of Elohim, persuading them concerning Yahushua from both the Torah of Moshe, and the Hanavi, from morning till evening. And some were persuaded by things which were spoken, and some disbelieved. So he shared according to the Torah written of Moshe and the Hanavi. The Karaites, they focus more on the 5 books of Moshe, and also the Pharisees focus more on the Babylon Talmud oral Mishnah. So, but he shared. There was no New Testament. He shared with the Torah and the Tanakh, because that's the Tanakh, has the prophets in it, the word Hanavi. So he presented his case with scriptures and persuaded many to receive according to this sect. Now, Look at chapter 22 of Ma'ach. 22:8. So I answer. Well, you know what? I'm going to back up. It's not fair for me to just go right to it, and we got time still. In verse 6, now it happened as I journeyed, and came near Damascus about noon. Suddenly a great light from Shamayim shone around me. And I fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me, Shaul, Shaul, why are you persecuting me? So I answered, who are you, Yahuwah? He had a question mark. And he said to me, excuse me, I am, in King James he would say, the Mashiach in red letters, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. But this is total wrong to the Hellenic Greek to say this, because the word of is an English word. It's a filler word. Sometimes there's Greek words with it, but particularly in this verse, the word of does not have a Greek word, a number to connect the dots. So, and the word Nazareth is not there. It's a different, completely Greek word for the clan of the particular area of the 6 to 9, 7 to 9 different clan locations of population of Nazirs, Nazoraim, that were 300 to 500 scattered in other areas in the mountains and other places. This is the Greek word 3480, which is the one Nazoraim, a person living, walking, a testimony and preaching and teaching the written or the word of watchman of the word. Okay? So our Mashiach in red letters says, first he says, I am. Iya. He starts off like, I am that I am. And then he says, Yahushua Nazorai in Greek. Or, since it was in the Hebrew tongue, it was Nazir. So our Messiah, after he resurrected, appears to the role of Shaul, a Pharisee of Pharisees of the strictest sect, okay, of the Mishnah oral law, and he's a claimer. He loves his badges and degrees and masters and all his degrees of knowledge, and he runs into the Mashiach, and our Messiah, he could have said, I am Yahushua from Shamayim. I'm Yahushua from your forefathers Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov. I'm Yahushua of whatever he could have picked, because he's now resurrected, but he chose to use the word Nazir, or in Greek, Nazaraim, meaning he's a watchman of the written Torah of Moshe, and he's practicing watchman of that word, making it carefully like the Nazirs did, watchmen of the Torah. So our Messiah claimed, even after his resurrection, to be a Nazir or Nazaraim. And look at Acts 6:14. Malachi 6:14. Let's go further up if you have any questions. You go look in the Greek and you'll see the word of does not exist, and that particular Greek word is for Nazaraim, a watchman of the Torah, and it is not the Greek word for the city or town or location. Okay? So here's another one that they misdid. And in the modern Latin, a modern Latin vulgar language, Vulgate, or the Reformation scriptures, but in the original Hellenic it was different. In Acts 6:14 it is written this: for we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth, no, of does not exist. It's Yahushua 3480, the Nazaraim. He said, this Nazaraim, they were calling in chapter 6 the Mashiach, this Nazaraim of the sect of the Nazaraim. The Nazaraim were highly respected as watchmen of Torah. And of course, some of them were priests, Kohan, like Yahukanan, and he come out and went to the wilderness to prepare the way for the Mashiach, and the Pharisees, it says he would not touch him because he was of the priesthood, and he said, touch not my anointed. That scripture that Christians use, about pastors and evangelists and these false prophet liars that they say, don't say nothing bad to him, touch not my anointing. You didn't understand the twisting of that verse. That verse is for a Kohan, a Levite, and a high priest. Okay, one that's been in the heckle. So that's why they did not touch Yahushua, the immerser in the wilderness, with his camel's hair and girded about with leather, eating wild honey and locusts. He was a wild vegetarian. He was a total non-GMO vegetarian back in those days. You know what I mean? He was a veggie man. Okay, so excuse me. So even back in chapter 6, it says that who he was. So Shaul confessed. From then on, he was part of the sect of the Nazarene, which was probably a very, how should I put it? You know, they weren't slamming Mercedes doors and BMWs. They weren't driving around with 26 six-spoke chariots. You know, they were running around in the wilderness. They were, locusts and wild honey was probably their little nice sweet dessert, you know. And I've eaten locusts and carob-covered locusts and carob-covered with honey. It is very delicious. I had a cashmere suit. You can't buy that suit today for $6,000-$7,000, a cashmere suit. But I used to play with people and says, yeah, John the Baptist, he's locusts and wild honey, and he wore camel's hair, and that's what I'm wearing. And you can't touch this suit for a couple grand back then in the 70s when I was wearing it. And just as a joke, I used to tell preachers. But for them, it was in the wilderness, and they were watchmen of Torah. And as quiet as he kept, some even think they're part of the group that hid the Dead Sea Scrolls, because they were located in the same coast area. Even our Mashiach, it's explained in scriptures where they try to cast him from his hometown over the side, and that is the ledger of Cumnan, the area not far from where they found the scrolls. So these are 7 sects of a few. There's probably more. And if you can help me, want to blog me and throw a few little out there and give me some documentation of 2 or 3 witnesses, it would help me for the future for a better teaching on this topic. I just wanted to share with you to let you know that there's more than 2 sects, number 1. Number 2, our Mashiach claimed to be a Nazir, a Nazarene, a watchman of the written Torah, a watchman of the Word. And then Shaul bragged where he came from, but then out of his own mouth he says, this is the sect I believe of my fathers, and I follow and I worship of my emunah, what's written of Moshe and what's also of the Hanavi. So I hope you enjoyed this little teaching, this little snack teaching, to share with others, and also to get an understanding of who we are as watchmen of the Torah, and who our Mashiach was, and who Shaul was. And I'm going to be giving a teaching very soon on the Paulini writings, so you won't be upset to delete Paul from your research or writing, because the stuff we had in the book of King Amos, in what they call the Bible of King James, I call him King Amos because there was no J's back then, is a total destruction to the character of the true understanding of Shaul as a watchman of Torah himself, and he was against the oral of what he practiced and learned, and he had the ability to teach others the right ruling of following what's written of Moshe in the Torah. Thank you for joining us tonight at Eagles Haven Ministry, and also Ruha Eliyahu channel on YouTube. I appreciate you coming. I ask that the Yahuwah will baruch you coming in. Yahuwah will keep you. May His light shine upon you. May the revelation understanding of the Ruach Kadosh overshadow you and teach you and show you things of the Word from this basic understanding, that you get a broader understanding of who you are today, walking as a Nazarene, walking as a Nazir, walking in the Torah, was written by Moshe and the Hanavi, and to walk in a broad understanding. Because very soon, we're going to expose all the works of darkness as the fullness comes to be of the manifestations of the sons of Elohim rise up with the anointing of Eliyahu, of a multitude of people professing and confessing and proclaiming and destroying the works of false religion and doctrines of men and demons. And we thank you for joining us. Please, if you like this teaching, subscribe to us and look at the other teachings at Eliyahu channel. Thank you for joining us.